OK, SQL databases. So as mentioned before, a database stores a lot of information in an organized way, and SQL is the way that the data is stored. So this is not a SQL class, but we'll give you a quick overview of at least the things you have to know before you can start executing SQL injection attacks. So at least for the purposes of this class, we'll do a little bit of simplification and just show you the basics. But you can think of SQL as a whole bunch of tables. So each database has a lot of tables. Each table has a name, and the table has a bunch of rows and columns. So if you've ever worked with something like Microsoft Excel or spreadsheets, it's kind of the same thing. You have lots of tables, and each one has rows and columns. There's also other properties of the database that we will not talk about, but if you take a databases class, you'll see some more details on how these work. So a quick fact sheet about SQL. It stands for those words, which I don't care about, but that's the language that you use to interact with the database. So if you want to ask the database for information, you write a SQL query, and then the database returns whatever you're looking for. There are some properties you want out of a database that we're not going to talk about. Something that's a little bit interesting if you've never seen SQL before is that the language doesn't actually specify how to do things. It specifies what the user wants. So the user will say, please give me all the rows matching this condition. But it will not say how to do that. Do you use a for loop to go through all the rows? Do you search the rows in some sort of binary tree data structure? None of that is what SQL cares about. It just cares about what the user wants. So a user running SQL just writes what they want, and then underneath, some sort of SQL parser or the database engine actually looks for what the user wants and turns it into some code that actually gets run. Now again, not a SQL class, but if you've never seen it before, it's useful to know that's what it is. OK, here's the stuff you do have to know to actually execute some attacks. So for now, we'll assume there's just one table, but do remember there can be lots of tables, and each table can have a name. So if you want to fetch rows out of a table, then what you'll do is you will say select, and then you'll say which specific columns you want. You'll say from, that's a reserved keyword, and then you'll name the table that you want something from. So here's a concrete example of the select in action. Here's the table. It's named bots. And maybe you just want the name column and the age column, and you don't care about the other ones. So the way to do that, select name, age from bots, and you get a subtable. This is the response to your query. It has 3 rows, because it's every row of the bots table, and just 2 of the columns that you asked for. So it's kind of what you'd expect. Now again, we don't care how you fetch those 2 tables. The query just says what you want, and SQL gives you what you want. OK, more SQL syntax. This is kind of a syntax-heavy section, but we'll get through it. Sometimes if you say star, that means you want everything. So it's a shorthand for all the columns. So if I say select star from bots, you just get all of the columns back. It would be the same as saying select ID, name, likes, age from bots. They give the same result. Now what if you don't want all of the rows? So here there's 3 rows, but maybe you just want some of the rows. And so the way that you would filter out specific rows that you want, we've already seen a way to filter out columns, but this is a way to filter out rows. The way that you would filter out specific rows is to use a keyword called where. And after where, you'll write conditions, and only the rows that match your conditions will appear in the output. And your conditions can use and, or arithmetic operators as well. So let's look at some where clauses that filter our output. So we'll still say select star from bots. That gives us all the columns. But we'll say, actually, I don't want all 3 rows. I only want the rows where the likes column matches the string pancakes. So what will SQL do? It will look through all the rows. The first row matches because likes has the value pancakes. Second row does not match. Third row does not match. So I get just a single row back, and it's the row where the likes field matches pancakes, and I get all 4 columns because I selected star. I can also combine different conditions. So I can say, I want all the rows, but only the ones where age is less than 2 or ID is equal to 1. Those are my two conditions. So what will happen is I will go through all the rows, and I'll look at those two columns. So the first column, well, let's see, ID is 1, so that's good. The second row, age is not less than 2, ID is not 1, so we don't want the second row. And the third row, age is less than 2, so we do want that one. So in summary, I want rows 1 and 3, and I don't want all the columns, I just want name. So there it is. I got the two names for which the corresponding rows had ID 1 or age less than 2. So it's kind of like what you'd expect, but basically the select filters out the columns, and the where clause filters out the rows. That's all you have to know for this class. Much more complicated queries are also possible.